The idea was that a music department, and this was explicit. I mean, a fellow named Archibald Davison at Harvard wrote about this in the 1920s, that conservatory style education did not belong in a university, and instead it should be based on the theory and history of music.
Mm.
Now, the theory side was so-called science of harmony. But in truth, the science was aspirational. It wasn't actual.
Aspirational.
It was. Okay. Now here's where I have to get a little bit nerdy and talk about
Please
Thomas
do.
Young. Thomas Young was one of the great geniuses of 19th century science, but died in his mid-20s. So think of him as a kind of science Mozart. I mean, just a towering genius without any special instruments or techniques. He thought about color vision. How do humans perceive color? And he made a hypothesis. He said, I think it's possible if they're able to perceive three separate colors, and then you can derive all the other colors from that. This was a brilliant hypothesis. I mean, it just came out of nowhere. Now, he died in 1829, maybe, in that area. His hypothesis was 1802. In the 1850s, Hermann von Helmholtz, who was one of the greatest German scientists, I mean, he was like the 19th century Einstein. He studied human perception, both music and vision. And he took up Jung's theory and proved that it was true. And since he started life as a physiologist, as a kind of anatomist, okay, he and others showed that in the human eye, there actually are little rods and cones that respond to three different colors. This is the so-called trichromatic theory of vision. And it's almost enough to explain color vision. You know, there's actually a physical substrate to this. Now, there's also the neural circuitry that comes after that. And part of that is what's called an opponent theory of visual processing. So, for example, if you stare at a kind of blue for a while and then look at a white page of paper, you'll see, I think, orange or red or something like that, but you'll see a kind of opposite color.
Mm.
Okay, so, you know, the whole package of color vision is not simple. I mean, the brain is not simple at all. It's one of the most complex things in the universe. But anyway, Jung and Helmholtz came up with this three-part, you know, with three things, you could have all the colors. And they actually found, not Jung, but later, actually found that physiologically, we have the basis for that in our eyes. So it's really brilliant science when you think about it. It's a little bit like the English neuroscientist named Sherrington, who 130 years ago said there must be something called the synapse that gets close to connecting neurons but doesn't actually touch them. He had no way to see a synapse. They're only a few molecules big. But 60 years later, they determined that, yes, that's actually true. So Sherrington, Young, these are amazing, you know, really insightful people. Okay, I think, well, Hugo von Riemann read Helmholtz. And also Hauptmann and von Ettingen and other people. And it's usually from that music side of things that we think of Riemann as getting his three functions. dominant, subdominant, and tonic in the middle. But I wonder, I don't have any proof for this, but I wonder if Riemann also read Helmholtz on vision, because the idea of the three cardinal colors being able to handle all vision is so similar to the idea of three cardinal harmonies accounting for all of harmony. The difference, unfortunately, for Helmholtz is that there's nothing in the ear that corresponds to the rods and cones with three different frequency sensitivities in the auditory system, to my knowledge. I mean, much is unknown about human perception, but there's no physical evidence of.
It's not like there's a dominant cone and a subdominant rod in the ear.
Exactly. There's nothing like that. And when you get down right down to it, what Riemann and many other German theorists of harmony were saying is that, well, everything's a cadence. All music is a cadence. The subdominant yearns for the dominant yearns for the tonic, and the tonic yearns for anything else. In terms of aesthetics or the practical behavior of humans, I think it's mostly just fanciful, aspirational science. It's not science at all, really. There are a lot of cadences in music, and there are a lot of phrases that are structured like extended cadences. And so, music has so many patterns in it that if you want to believe that everything's a cadence and every 4 wants to go to a 5 and every 5 wants to go to a 1, you can find evidence for that and you can make yourself happy.
But, okay, so sorry.
Well, 1 goes to 5, but 5 doesn't go to 1. 6 goes to 3. And most theories of harmony say that doesn't make any sense at all. That's a pattern that everybody knows, and in fact likes if they ever went to a wedding where they play Pachelbel's canon. Okay.
So, but there functions is something that really, I know great musicians. There are some who absolutely swear by it. They think absolutely a function has to exist. The cadence is perhaps proof of that. That the cadence 5-1 is a powerful sensation. Professor Gjerdingen, you were in cognition for a very long time, musical cognition. So isn't that a true thing? I mean, that's a truism, truly, that there's a sort of a resolution, right? When we go from a 5-1, that cannot be denied. So we might get the wording wrong or the description wrong, but that's a thing that exists in nature that we might not call it a function, but it exists.
It exists in our minds. In other words, we recognize the schema, we know where we are in it, and we know what comes next. Now, someone like Schenker, for example, thought that these desires and expectations are in the tones. They confuse something that's second nature with nature. It's only second nature because we hear it happening time and time and time again. But there's nothing intrinsic about the thing that makes it act in a certain way. Theories of harmony get hung up on saying that chords have meanings outside of any context. If I'm in C, an F chord wants to do something. Okay. But it really doesn't. It's fine as it is. It doesn't give Christmas presents. It doesn't sing carols.
Why does the brain enjoy a cadence so much? Has science ever been able to explain that?
Oh, the satisfaction of expectations. does release,
But
chemicals
this
in the
is
brain.
almost like a universal thing around. I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm displaying my ignorance, but
Oh, no,
perhaps
no, it's
in other cultures, do people? I think people enjoy a G chord, so called, going to a C chord. There's a universal aspect to that. Surely
no,
there isn't. Okay, so you can explain.
no. Well, traditionally, most of the world's cultures didn't use triads at all.
Okay.
They're very, very rare.
Okay, so maybe
Just
you could explain that. Maybe that would be very helpful. Is if that's a so to relate to this idea that things are intrinsic. Perhaps they're not intrinsic at all outside of certain cultures.
yeah, there's a kind of wonderful hubris in European 19th century musicians and people who wrote about music. Remember, at the time, Germany, not so successfully, France, rather successfully, Britain, spectacularly successfully, were grabbing all the real estate in the world. It really was a truthful statement that the sun never set on the British Empire,
Mm.
because wherever the sun was shining, there was something owned by Britain in the vicinity. So the Europeans tended to think of themselves as the master race. We know how bad this can get, but that what they were doing in music was a superior kind of music that the rest of the world would get up along into eventually as they became civilized. Well, I suppose that seemed plausible around 1900, 1910. But of course, they didn't see hip hop coming. Okay.
Well, isn't that not even true in like the Renaissance? I mean, like there's the soprano cadence, there's the alto cadence, there's the tenor cadence, there's different. So it's not necessarily always five that you see that's being used as
Correct.
the cadence.
Correct. So, for example, in the Renaissance, a imperfect consonance expanding by half and whole steps to a perfect consonance was a cadence. So, by the time we get to Bach, that has to be a half cadence. But in the Renaissance, it's just as good a cadence as it's the same
Mm.
cadence. Now, some of those can be interpreted as 5-1, some can't. But it was a melodic art. It was the combination of melodies.
Mm. Okay, so there wasn't this primacy of 5-1. That
No,
didn't. That.
no. Now, Hugo Riemann, again, in his history of music theory, was quite explicit. This is, if you want to call it colonialism in the historical sense. He was quite explicit that even Gregorian chant was based on harmonic functions, but
Wow,
they didn't know it yet. That
that's
they
a
were just
strong claim.
yes. These are universal claims. You see that all of mankind is subject to harmonic functions, all of human history. It's just that most humans were ignorant and unaware of this shining light that German science was going to shine on them and make their lives better. But, for most of the world's people, rhythm and melody are the whole ball game. For most of human history.
Oh,
And harmony of the European type really doesn't come into it uh, until European influence.